Hello students, welcome back as we continue on our reading of The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, Chapter 11. Before we get started reading our book, we're going to take a look at a couple of vocabulary words. And the first is the word crowed, which is a verb that says to make a loud noise like a bird cawing. If you look closely at this word, you see that it's got the word crow as its root word. So think about the sound that a big black crow makes outside, and think about a person making a noise that is loud and sharp like a crow might. Our next word is salvation, which is a noun and means to be protected or saved from harm. And if you look at these two people in this boat, they are stranded in the middle of nowhere, and they are desperately looking for salvation. They are looking for the person or the people who are going to come save them. So salvation is looking to be saved. Our next word is ritual, which is a noun and means to do a series of steps regularly. You have rituals in your life. They are things that you do every day, basically the same way. So you have a morning ritual. Every morning you wake up, you brush your teeth, you go to the kitchen, you eat your breakfast. You might do things a little bit differently, but you've got a set series of steps that you do every morning. That's your morning ritual. You probably also have a bedtime ritual. Every night you take your shower, you put on your pajamas, you brush your teeth, you get into bed. Those are the steps that you take to complete that ritual. And then our last word is the word frenzied, which is an adjective that means wildly excited or uncontrolled. If you suddenly, right now, started running around your house, throwing your hands above your head and waving them around and yelling, we would be saying that you were acting in a frenzied way. You're being wild, you're excited, you're almost out of control. Okay, so that's what frenzied means. So let's see how these words pop up as we go through our reading of Chapter 11 in The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. When we left him last, Lolly had been to visit her parents, Nellie and Lawrence. She was not a person that Edward liked at all, and at the end of that chapter, she picked up Edward by his ears, threw him into a trash can, and took him out of Nellie and Lawrence's house. So let's see what's in store for Edward in this chapter. Edward ended up at the dump. He lay on top of orange peels, coffee grounds, rancid bacon, and rubber tires. The first night he was at the top of the garbage heap, and so he was able to look up at the stars and find comfort in their light. You know, it's interesting to me here that we see another reference to stars. You know, often an author will refer to something or say something over and over again when he really wants to make a point. And Edward has been looking at stars in every setting he finds himself in this story. When he was at Abeline's house, he looked out the window at the stars. When he was on the ship, he looked up at the stars. When Lawrence rescued him, Lawrence would take him out for walks, and Edward would look up at the stars. And now the author is giving us kind of a clue, I think, as to why the stars are so important. He says he found comfort in their light. So I'm thinking that because the stars are something that Edward has always enjoyed looking at, he finds them comforting and calming, so that no matter what terrible situation he's in, when he looks at those stars, he can kind of feel a little bit relaxed and not so anxious. In the morning, a short man came climbing through the trash and rubble. He stopped when he was standing on top of the highest pile. He put his hands under his armpits and flapped his elbows. The man crowed loudly. He shouted, "Who am I? I'm Ernest, Ernest who is king of the world. And how can I be king of the world? Because I am king of garbages, and garbages is what the world is made of. Ha, ha, ha! Therefore, I am Ernest, Ernest who is king of the world. He crowed again. Edward was inclined to agree with Ernest's assessment of the world being made of garbage, especially after the second day at the dump, when a load of trash was deposited directly on top of him. He lay there, buried alive. He could not see the sky. He could not see the stars. He could see nothing. What kept Edward going, what gave him hope, was thinking of how he would find Lolly and exact his revenge. He would pick her up by the ears. He would bury her under a mountain of trash. But after almost 40 days and nights had passed, the weight and the smell of the garbage above and below him clouded Edward's thoughts, and soon he gave up thinking about revenge and gave in to despair. It was worse, much worse than being buried at sea. It was worse because Edward was a different rabbit now. He couldn't say how he was different. He just knew that he was. He remembered again Pellegrina's story about the princess who had loved nobody. The witch turned her into a warthog because she loved nobody. He understood that now. He heard Pellegrina say, "You disappoint me." "Why?" he asked her. "Why do I disappoint you?" But he knew the answer to that question too. It was because he had not loved Abilene enough, and now she was gone from him, and he would never be able to make it right. And Nellie and Lawrence were gone too. He missed them terribly. He wanted to be with them. The rabbit wondered if that was love. Wow. I'm thinking that these are really a couple of very important paragraphs. Stuck there under that pile of garbage, Edward can't look at the stars and be comforted. So he's looking at the past. He's thinking about what Pellegrina said to him, and he's thinking about that story about the princess and the warthog, and he's thinking about what that means to him. Remember when I read the story at the beginning, I wondered, why did Pellegrina tell that story? And why did she say, "You disappoint me," to Edward? We really didn't know then. But now we see Edward reflecting on his behavior, on his character traits, and on his actions. And he's seeing that maybe he's kind of like that princess, that he didn't love Abilene like he should have. She really loved him. But he just, no big deal. He really cared more about himself and what his clothes were like and how people were treating him. He was a little bit selfish and not super humble, right? And now he's changing because he's got nothing but time to think about that story and what it meant. And in addition, we see that Edward is really changing. Before, he might have been sad that he was stuck in the muck at the bottom of the ocean, but now he's not just sad and worried that he's stuck. He misses the people in his life who cared for him. And that's a big change for Edward. So these are really, really big changes that the author is showing us that Edward is going through. All right, let's read on. Day after day passed, and Edward was aware of time passing only because every morning he could hear Ernest performing his dawn ritual, cackling and crowing about being king of the world. On his 180th day at the dump, salvation arrived for Edward in a most unusual form. The garbage around him shifted, and the rabbit heard the sniffing and panting of a dog. Then came the frenzied sound of digging. The garbage shifted again, and suddenly, miraculously, the beautiful, buttery light of late afternoon shone on Edward's face. Oh, I can't wait to see what happens in chapter 12.